GMO! Genetic modified organisms. I see, in my life, I've never seen a particular topic that have caused problem like this topic. One people on one side, another people on one side, they're just having arguments. As a matter of fact, there's nothing you will say about GMO that's going to please anybody, whether for or against. But my job today is to give you the facts on GMO unaltered. Let's go.
So this is by Aproko Doctor. The opinions in this video are my opinions alone, and this video was not sponsored by any organization or persons. Let's go in.
If you are here for conspiracy theory, please outside the door. That's not why we're here. We're here to learn. Let's start from G, genetic. What exactly does it mean? It simply means genes. Genes made up of DNA that send particular codes to give you something that you can see in an organism or how it acts. For example, some plants have big seeds, some plants have small seeds. Some plants have longer stems, some plants, insects cannot eat it. Some plants, insects used to attack. These are just genetic abilities that plants follow and come. But now, when we say genetic modification, some of us think that genetic modification actually started in 2024, 2025. It's not true. Genetic modification has been there since the days of our forefathers.
Professor Christopher Amwa is Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research, CEFSA, is right here with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Prof. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
Let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover. So it's been said, and this is a basic, that at some point everybody has had some GMO anyway. So why are you raising issues now when some meal, some fruit? The Prof yesterday gave the example of banana, that the original banana has seeds in it, but what we're eating right now does not have that seed. So let's start from there. It has been said that we've all had some GMO. So what's the point?
First and foremost, let's clarify the difference between GMO and hybridization.
Good.
So naturally, in the natural environment, plants, crops hybridize. It's a natural process, an environmental process. So the confusion the Prof, I guess, must have been infusing is the confusion of mixing up hybridization and genetic modification. Hybridization happens in the natural, either through the natural evolutionary process or by farmers, breeders who align with the natural processes to aid the crops, the plants to hybridize. And that could be the reason you see some of these plants over the years changing in their nature.
For example, if your forefather was a farmer and he found that this particular plant have big seeds and I want to have big seeds the next season, your father does something, or your forefather does something where, selective breeding, he gets that plant, make sure he plants only it alone so that they can give him more bigger crops next season. Your forefathers have been doing it. And it might shock you. But there are certain plants that if you see it today, that is not what it was in the beginning. For example, corn. Yes. The corn that you see now is not the corn that was in the beginning. The corn that you are seeing now was actually gotten from a wild grass known as teosinte. Yes. So this is corn. This one you're looking at is a modified corn by your forefathers. Another example of traditional genetic modification is anything from the cabbage family. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, they were all gone by selective breeding. Yes. Another thing that was done by traditional genetic modification are the current apples that you're seeing now. The current apples that you're seeing now, shall just know that your forefathers genetically modified it. The one you're seeing now is not the one that used to be before. When we say modification, it just means, there are certain genes that I want more than other genes. So I find my way or interfere in the process that occurs naturally so that I can get that gene more.
So I give you a classic example. If it is true that everyone must have eaten GMO at a point in time, that explains clearly why we should interrogate the impact of GMOs, because they have been around and we have seen some consequences. And that's why we're asking questions. And I think everybody who eats food should ask those questions. And people should stop demonizing or criminalizing those who ask questions. Because we see a movement, a trend that seeks to take absolute control of the human person to the extent that you give me something to eat and I don't have any right to even question what I'm eating. That's unfair.
Is GMO affecting our local farmers? So what that simply means is that if you plant the modified seeds in a place where you have local seeds or very close to local seeds, cross-pollination can happen. It's either wind will carry the reproductive parts of that plant, or insects will go to this place, fly to the other place, and before you know what's happening, cross-pollination can happen here. And if this modified seed is more dominant, it can overshadow the local seeds so that the local seeds can no longer germinate after a while. So that means that that local farmer no longer has a choice. If this particular modified seed are the sterile ones, it means that after a while, his seeds might not be able to grow anymore. You have taken that choice away from that local farmer. So yes, it can affect local farming. However, there are other upsides to the genetically modified plants. For example, there are certain areas where you don't have enough rain. Everywhere is always dry. Some of these modified seeds have been genetically modified in such a way that it can grow in those very harsh areas.
If it's not broken, why fix it? So do we have a problem really with growing crops with yield such that we're now requesting or bringing in what is called hybrid or genetically modified crops? Do we have a problem with agriculture in Nigeria?
Yes and no. I like that question. I reiterate, I come from Benue State, the food basket of Nigeria. Over the years, beginning from around 2009, something unique began to happen in this country and in some African countries. Food production centers began to be attacked in the name of banditry, insurgency, or whatsoever. Now, automatically, that impinged on yields because farmers are killed. If you'll observe, it's not the people in the commercial centers that have been attacked. Rarely are they attacked. It is the farmers. And this prompts up the possibility of a hidden agenda that is being unrolled. Now, you observe that farmers are killed, farmers are being chased out of their farming areas, and automatically, what would you expect the next harvest season? The farms are not tended. The quote and unquote, the cattle come in, eat what was planted. Now, that is the yes of the problem with our food production system or food supply system. And recently, Mangu, local government in Plateau, was attacked, and that affected maize production. And during that period was when Tela maize was released. I mean, does that? We are not speaking. We're not stating absolutes, but we are trying to pinpoint dots that anyone who cares will begin to try to connect them. It's just a deductive reasoning thing. Yes. Now, the next challenge is, the next challenge is food production has gone low. That's one. And there is this talk about climatic changes, climate change. There is something about climate change that is said to affect food production. It's not just food production it affects. But I'd like to clarify that climate has ever been changing from evolution. Climate has never been a static phenomenon. Climate change has always been with us. And that is also part of what synergistically informs evolution. Species, according to what we learned in traditional biology, species evolve over time. And these are the attributes, these are the inputs that inform evolution. But now, that in a way affects food production. But I think, and from empirical observations we have on the field, for example, when you have 800,000 farmers in Benue State living in IDP camps for 8 to 10 years, wouldn't that affect food production, considering that Benue was and has been a major feeder to the Nigerian food supply system? The same thing happens to Plateau, Nasarawa, Taraba, Jigawa. You remember you know about the Hadejia Basin? Now, interestingly, we think that these are issues that could be handled, not to go and begin to bring higher yielding crops to introduce that will promote monocropping and affect negatively the natural agroecology, the diversification of crops and plants.
Another reason why there's also genetically modification in some of these things is pests. How many of you remember when if you buy beans, there's always carbide inside? That's one of the reasons why they now say, okay, rather than using carbide, let us modify these organisms in such a way that it is resistant to this particular insect, so that this insect can no longer survive where this plant is. is also done to increase plant yield. In other words, more plants, more production, more harvest for the farmer, more food for everybody, and that's one of the pros. Remember, like I said, we're not doing conspiracy here. It is pros, cons, good, bad, and the ugly, so that you can make your own decision. One of the solutions is that the government can designate areas in which these modified seeds can be planted that is far away from any local seeds, so that the chances of cross-pollination are very little, giving local farmers a chance. Because some of them have not understood this new technology, and it's only fair that you give them the opportunity to decide what they want to do. This GMO thing that we're talking about now has actually been around since the 1990s, Kengbe, and scientists have been tracking it on and off the farm. So this is not the first time GMO is out. So those of you that are shouting, oh, this is something that is just recent because it's the year 2000, it's not true. Since 1990s, the one in the lab have been sold to consumers. Another concern about these GMO seeds is that a lot of the GMO seeds that are currently in circulation are actually controlled by a few companies. And these companies can decide what they want to do with it. They can say, I'm not selling to the farmers anymore. Some of them can even decide some of the prices that they are selling to these farmers. Some of them can even decide who they are selling to. Some of them have locked their IP and their patents in such a way that sometimes even the farmers are meant to sign contracts to decide whether they continue buying their seed or they use their normal seeds. There is also the concern that some of these modified seeds can actually go into a particular area and actually overshadow the local plants that are already occurring in that particular area, removing biodiversity from the particular topic. Some people are going around saying that GMO seeds, there's plenty chemical inside. Let's say the truth and shame the devil. When you want to make GMO, you carry the DNA. DNA is the, like I say, it's like code, small code that determines, for example, the color of your eye, the shape of your fingers. They carry that particular tiny code. The small, they go inside, find it. And then they kind a cell of a particular plant and then put the DNA inside that cell. Then they will not grow that particular cell that they just put inside the tissue culture, and then this tissue starts to grow. By the time it has now grown, the seed from this one that has now grown is now the genetically modified seed. So as you can see, you have DNA, you have cell, you have plant, you have seeds. Harmful chemical is inside.
We've interrogated the food chain. There is this group of chemicals. I'm traditionally a chemist, moved into bioinorganic chemistry and into experimental medicine. Now, we have observed that, for example, a chemical, a herbicide known as atrazine, which was very fondly used around our environments, was causing a change of sex in amphibians, in frogs, in waters. Because when farmers apply these things, the crops that we eat are produced by plants that are known as vascular plants. That means they uptake, they have vasculature, like we have veins and arteries in our bodies. So when these things are applied, and these genetically modified organisms come with herbicides, pesticides, because, mind you, it's the same companies that are producing both. The companies like Monsanto, sorry to call the name, a company that was producing herbicides suddenly transformed into producing genetically GMOs. Now, we have also seen the process of genetic modification incorporates some herbicides. That's why you have like a popular market name herbicide that is very popular across Africa. In Nigeria, it's very popular. From Benue, where I come from and I work, I see a lot of farmers use it. Go to the market, it's everywhere. Now, that chemical, that herbicide is called Roundup. And that herbicide is incorporated in the modification of some of those crops that are pushed to the market for commercial planting. They are called RR soy or RR maize or Roundup ready. That means these crops can withstand Roundup. That occasions farmers to apply Roundup at liberty to the fields. Because before now, let me give you a story. Before now, this company that was producing this chemical, this herbicide, was selling, and the major markets were here in Africa. But something happened because of the something we call scientifically phytotoxicity. These chemicals are toxic to the phytochemistry of the phytophysiology of the crop, of the plant. Now, these chemicals were also adversely affecting the crops, the plants. And farmers were experiencing some adverse effects, some of the crops dying together with the weeds. So these companies now came up with modifying the crops so that they can withstand the impact, the effect of those herbicides. Now farmers are at liberty to apply those herbicides freely without fear of harming their crops. And what that means is that more herbicides are pumped into the environment, unlike when I was growing up, that my parents and myself, when I was being taught how to farm, because Benue is the food basket of Nigeria. And we all farm. Every household in Benue is a farming household. So we used to pull out weeds, but now go to Benue, everybody is applying, pumping chemicals. And now what that means is that environmentally, when rain falls, there is runoff, there is washdown. And some of these residues are run off into surface waters, and some of them seep into groundwaters. And then it ends up in human bodies because people drink those things, and some of it is absorbed and retained, persists in the vasculature or even in the anatomy or the structure of the seed crops.
I don't know where people are getting this thing from. I also think that another people that have caused damage to this particular conversation are the people that are not experts on this issue. So everybody is just opening their mouth to be trying about it. Even me, I'm not an agricultural expert.
I'm a scientist. I'm a professor of bioinorganic chemistry.
Which now leads me to the next question. Can GMO wipe out the human population? Like I said very few ago, if you did not skip it, is that GMOs have actually been introduced since the 1990s. That's how many years ago? Almost 30 something years ago. That's when it has been introduced. So if they are wiping out, almost all of us will not be alive by now. You also need to understand that you need to have a balanced view on some of these topics. Yes, we understand that there are concerns. We understand that there are benefits. We also understand that there are ugly parts. Your job as an adult is to understand all these three parts so that you can make an informed decision for yourself. Not just running around. They say DNA has chemical inside. They say it's going to wipe out the population. I even saw one that they said the DNA is supposed to control our mind. How? How? GMO are controlling population? I don't see it. And now say GMO is causing cancer. There is no scientific study as of today that has linked GMO to cancer.
I'm sorry, I have to correct you.
Go ahead.
The evidence is everywhere. The papers are there. I'm a scientist. I deal with them, I publish, I research. And in researching, we do literature review. We don't just jump into the laboratory to begin to investigate. We look at previous investigations and see where there are gaps, see where we need to improve. So the evidence, the publications are plenty there. If it was the right forum, I could reel them out to you. There are hundreds, tons of scientific publications proven in established journals, proving the relationship, negative of course, of the impact of GMOs on human or animal health. Because some of the studies are done on animals, and some are observatory, some are meta-studies, something we call meta-analysis. So when you take a population and you look at the impact of the certain kind of thing they've been ingesting, and you can draw up inferences. So there are tons of reports on that. Then secondly, you say, this is food. This is food. There's something naturally, everybody knows, it's called food poisoning. If you ate something, some pudding, or you ate something about 8 hours ago, and then your system begins to respond, you don't need me to go to the laboratory to tell you that you should find out what is causing that. And we have seen, there is a very popular report by Professor Arlini in Italy, who demonstrated how they ingest feeding rats. Because, you know, in animal studies, we look at those species that have similarities with the humans, and rats are like that. Now, these things cause testicular tumors. They caused cancers in those rats. Genetically modified maize was fed those animals, and it caused cancers. Well, so people eat those things, and these adverse effects are being experienced. If you go to the hospitals now, you see the graph is climbing. Juvenile diabetes, before now, diabetes type 2 was not a disease of children. Before now, hypertension was not a disease of children, but it's rampant now. Where is it coming from?
Another thing that we should be asking for is when it comes to research, there's something called independent research. So in other words, you find a person in the middle that can actually do the research that is not from the side of the people or on the side of the government. Their job is just to state the facts as they are and find out. It's not sponsored by any corporate body, so that the findings are the findings. Because you already know that if the corporate people who are in charge of these seats sponsor some of this research, some of the findings may never make it to the public. So independent research has to be a thing.
And then secondly, research is ongoing. But you see, in the scientific...
Pardon me, sir. So for instance, for the Roundup corn now that is emerging, what is the scientific research to prove that the consumption of that is related to any type of cancer? And indeed, you can also talk about other GMO crops, for instance, the tomato and allergies, cancer.
In the corn you mentioned, I already mentioned the research in Italy. There are also researches in Argentina, in Southern America. Now, this research proved directly that these things have a direct link with cancers. Now, there is also many researches with respect to some of these ingredients, some of these chemicals, some of these processes that are used in genetic modification. I just mentioned one to you. Now, you insert pesticides. These are chemicals which we know traditionally that are toxic. We know them as toxic. But let me say this. You see, there is this argument that this particular, for example, Teller maize that is released for commercial planting in Nigeria, where is the research? There are two factors that work against research. Number one, we, the researchers, are asking the federal government authorities, because we are patriotic, where is the research that proved that this thing is safe before you approved it for commercial proliferation? So, you see, let's not put the cart before the horse. That research, first of all, should be done by the one who is introducing it to prove to the consumer, because we're talking consumer protection now, to prove to the consumer that this thing is safe. Now, they are saying, yes, it is safe, but you see, the second issue is that the proprietary companies that are pushing these organisms say that these are trade secrets. We can't reveal them to you. They are trade secrets.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they say. All over the world, they say
the research that proves that
yes, because number one, I need a sample of this Teller maize. Right now, I have not accessed it. Until I will surreptitiously go and disguise as a farmer to go and collect it where they are distributing them, then I will go and run them. But before I run them, people would have, people would have started consuming them. So the first thing to do scientifically is for the agency regulating this to demand for this information from the manufacturer, because these are patented seeds. These are patented technology. Somebody worked on them. So this agency ought to have requested for this. That's first. Secondly, this agency ought to have made this report, this information available to Nigerian consumers.
This is also where we call on the government to be more transparent. But not just about transparency. Speak to the people where they are.
Are you suggesting, by your last thought, that this is another form of economic neocolonialism?
Absolutely. You see, number one, the seeds that we traditionally use are not patented. I plant, I harvest, I reserve some, I replant the next season. But here is a new hegemony that is coming, and we need, as patriotic Nigerians, we need to educate ourselves that, first of all, this high yield, we have results in the field as scientists, that these so-called touted high yields are not reproducible. That means you plant and you get 8 tons per hectare this year, this planting season. Next season, you cannot replant that for 2 reasons. Firstly, the company that owns the patent will forbid you from doing that. We've seen it happen in India.
I'm sorry, so you cannot dry them, and
No. The licensing forbids that. The licensing forbids that. That means you are tethered to the producer of those seeds, that every season you go back to buy them. And you know what that means. I don't need to overflog it. It means...
The natural question on our minds, is the government aware of all this? I think that's what we
can end on that.
We don't think government is not aware of all this in absolute terms. That is why this education is needful.
But we now have a biotechnology agency. If government is aware of all of these dangers...
Let me tell you something about research. That biotechnology agency is a research agency, a regulatory agency. There is something in research that we call conflict of interest. You must have heard or read about it.
Yeah, we know about it.
Now, there's something very important, very, very important with research, which is called funding.
Right.
He who funds research determines the outcome of the research. Now, if you look at systematically, it's a sing-song. It's taken for granted that ASU and federal government always have altercations.
Right.
Over what? Funding. Funding. So research has been systematically underfunded or not funded, and now exposing us researchers to those people who have the money to fund.
Wow.
And there is no free funding anywhere.
He who pays the piper dictates the tune.
Absolutely.
Prof, this has been a very interesting one. Clearly not the end of the conversation, but we have to anchor at this point. Wow. Professor Christopher Amwa, Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research.